let me make myself a little bigger so it feels like I am part of this with you guys. All right, well, actually, let's start with, this is a picture of my team. Actually, it's about a year or so old, so there's some, we've actually grown, and there's a few new faces and that we don't have here, but we continue to evolve. And you know, one of the things, again, I was talking about is like this idea of becoming not just a feature team, not just a team that builds features, but an empowered product team. And, you know, if you think about like the spectrum, and I think Marty Kagan does a really good job in some of his writings of late, describing kind of the different types of teams. And I think we all shudder at this idea that maybe our team is a feature factory. In other words, we get orders, we build the features, and we ship them, and we just do this on an ongoing basis. But I think the shift in the conversation, at least for modern teams, is less about the ability to ship features and more about how we impact the business by way of business outcomes. And I think this is a trend that you're going to see more and more, is that the business wants product teams to really be more business outcome oriented. Who cares if we can cross the list off all the things that we shipped this quarter? What's more important is that we're actually creating value for our customers and achieving business outcomes. And so business outcomes, that's what we're going to focus on. We want to kind of go to that side of the spectrum, and I'm going to talk about how. Speaking of Marty Kagan, I love this quote again that came out recently, and he says this: most companies have not been convinced to empower their teams in any meaningful sense. Well, why is that? And then when he asked a bunch of CEOs and other key leaders, he said the answer typically boils down to something in the realm of trust. One word: trust. The fact that leaders don't necessarily trust the teams. And what does that mean? Why don't they trust the teams? Well, maybe they didn't get outcomes. Maybe they don't know if they're building the right thing. They don't know if they're listening. Maybe they're inconsistent. And so I really want to break this down into like how you can become more consistent and you can develop that trust. And so another way to think about this, and trying to keep this pretty simple, is that empowered teams are trusted teams. Well, how do you gain trust? Well, this is not only in business, but this is in life. You create trust by making and keeping commitments. And in this case, commitments, think of business outcomes. Imagine a world, a business setting, where you're continually hitting outcomes. This is something where you engender a lot of trust and a lot of respect. And this is, of course, the goal. So, you know, again, thinking a lot about this subject, you know, systems, they can help you make and keep business commitments, business objectives, and business outcomes over time consistently. And the way to kind of help with this is this idea of an innovation system, which I'm really going to be speaking a lot today. What are the different components of our innovation system that might be parts of it might be relevant for you? There might be tweaks, but you know, this is about, and it says here, is about being intentional about everything we do. You know, why do we use this process? Why do we use this tool? Why do we choose this business outcome? Why do we fail at this one? Things like that. It's about being intentional in everything we do. Now, to put a nice little, you know, almost Simon Sinek diagram on this, think about it as empowered teams are who we want to become. That's the goal of this conversation. We want to better understand how we become. The system is the system that enables us to be innovative and to hit commitments on a repeated basis. And of course, that's what we're focused on. And then the outcome, of course, of all this is the actual outcomes, the measures. And so we'll talk about that as well. But really, the focus is on this middle section of the system that enables us to become the empowered product team. All right, this is a snapshot of our innovation system at Pendo as of today. And I would say Some parts we're really advanced on, some are a little bit still in flight, and we're constantly testing ourselves and talking about process and talking about tools. And again, being intentional about everything that we do. So our 5 components are strategy, discovery, delivery, product operations, and design system. Now, I've now given this talk a couple of times, and I've started with this, and I ended with the environment, meaning the environment is absolutely part of our innovation system. And I ended with that because I thought, oh, and by the way, you need to make sure your environment is one that cultivates creativity and innovation and safety. And the feedback that I'm perceiving as I share this with a live audience is that this is one of the most important parts. In other words, don't do all of these things and ensure that you have a good environment. Start with the environment. Make sure your environment is one that, again, engenders the type of failure and risk-taking and innovation that's required to do the other things. So in this presentation, I'm going to start here. So let's talk about environment. Well, as many of you know, there has been a bunch of studies on what it takes to really the parts of the environment that are so important for things like innovation, for high-performing teams. And in fact, Google, and if you remember, it was something called Project Aristotle, where they spent a lot of time and resources to understand what are the factors. Is it where they went to school? Is it the management courses they took? Is it their level or ability to code? Like, what is the thing? Is there a silver bullet when it comes to high performing teams? And what they found is that the most important thing is in fact psychological safety. And what is psychological safety? We're going to talk about this, and I'll give you some of my examples, but it's something you should read and study about and ask yourselves, do we feel like it's okay to make mistakes? Do we feel like it's okay to be ourselves, to bring our full selves to work? Is it okay to make mistakes? What happens when I bring up ideas? Are they shot down? Are they built upon? What is that? So I want to share just really quickly a story from high school. I had this really, and I didn't think of it back then as an A/B test, but I had this kind of almost perfect A/B test when looking at 2 different teams. When I was on I believe it was my sophomore year, it was the last year that they allowed us to play for a select team and then also the school team. I think once you hit varsity, you kind of had to focus on varsity. I don't know if that's the same today with AAU. I have no idea. But the point is that I played on 2 teams. And what was funny about it or interesting now that I reflect is that the makeup of the 2 teams was very similar, makeup in terms of the players. So we had pretty much the same players on both teams, the same group of guys that started, the same dynamics, the same personalities. It was the same. The one big difference was the coach. Now, you could say, well, it's the players on the court that are going to make the difference. Well, if you step back a minute, and again, I never thought about these terms when I was a sophomore in high school, but if you think about it, coaches are those that implement a system. And they had 2 very different systems. Systems were how you practice, what was important, different strategies, different game planning, who did what, roles, responsibility. All these things were really systems that the coach would dictate. And so it's actually the coach is very important. So we had this really nice A/B test, same team, essentially, different coaches, different systems. And what was really amazing is the difference between the 2. There was one coach who let us play. He was about, they both were about winning. So don't get me wrong. That was definitely something but again, what was their system? What was their process or vision of how you won? And there was one coach that let us play pretty free. We could make mistakes, understanding that the penalty or what would get you benched was not making mistakes, but it was not being aggressive. And on the flip side, we had a coach who wanted perfection. And every time one of us made a mistake, we were pulled out. You could just feel it. Let's say I would double dribble or I would travel. As soon as I did, I could see a guy come up from the bench getting ready to sub in. I knew he was coming for me. And so that system created a behavior on our team. That system told me that it was more, if I wanted to be out there, and I wanted to be out there the whole game, that it was more important not to fail and to play safe than it was to win. So I wanted to be out there. Of course I wanted to win, but I wanted to be out there. So I played not to make a mistake, versus the other team, I played to be aggressive. And so very different incentives, very different system. And of course, I mean, you can imagine the team that was more fun to play with, the team that won more, again, with the same personnel, was the team that was led by a coach that had a system that said, I want you to take risks. I want you to be yourself. Don't make mistakes, but if you make them, chin up. We'll play the next series. And so we were more playing to win, playing to be aggressive. It was an attitude, and we won. And we won more, and we had a lot more fun. And so you can see the system and both the safety, the psychological safety on the court was very different between teams. I was allowed to make mistakes on one and not on the other. So I want that to settle in. I also want to share another kind of source of inspiration for this, which is the idea of something that I read in Creativity Inc., which, by the way, big plug, one of the best business books I've read in the context of building and creating, and especially products or whatever it is. Very inspirational book. And one of the quotes, I really liked it, and it said something to the point of, if you give a good idea to a mediocre team, they'll screw it up. And this is kind of, in my mind, always the litmus test. So good idea, mediocre team, they screw it up. But you put a mediocre idea in front of a great team or a great product team to make it contextually relevant. They will either fix it and, or scrap it, or come up with a better idea. In other words, they have, just like their basketball team, our goal was to win, and we could make mistakes along the way. And we felt comfortable suggesting plays. We felt comfortable in this case, changing the idea or fixing it or scrapping it and coming up with a better idea. In other words, a team that does this feels safe. They have a good environment, a good culture of innovation. And frankly, it's something we all need to do a better job of cultivating. I can tell you personally, I feel personally responsible for our fourth quarter for not creating this type of environment. We were under a lot of pressure, and I don't think we acted this way. And in our first quarter this year, we've been really focused on what does it mean to create a psychologically safe culture. So we're working on it, but it's about understanding it's one of the most important things, and that we should start there before anything else. Okay, so like I said, start there before any of the other ones. Now I'm going to jump into some of the other ones. Some of them I'm going to go in more detail than others. I think the idea for this is just to give you a flavor of how I'm thinking about our system, how I'm continuing to evolve it, so you can reflect with your team to understand what types of changes or experiments that you want to run in order to create a high-performing team. All right, so this is the design system. We're going to start here with strategy. And the way I think about strategy is, this is, at least in my mind, this is one of the best ways to build trust. And I'll explain that as we go through it. All right, before I do that, this is probably a bad flow, but one of the things that I would call out on this slide before I go into the design system is that part of the system isn't just a series of process or mechanisms or strategy, but it's also a set of tools. And these tools help enable our system. So they are a part of it because they're enabling components. And so this is our tech stack as of today. I don't know if you can see the upper right with my video, but this is our tech stack of today. Again, it changes, it evolves. I won't, again, be specifically talking about each of these, but tools like Gong and Notion and Miro are all great tools for team discovery and rapid brainstorming and insights into customers. Airtable has been a fantastic tool. We've kind of gone on and off of it. And then there's several others. And so I'm, again, not going to spend too much time talking about tools, but just know that they're a really important element to your design system. Okay, now jumping back into strategy. So like I said, this first one is really important. It's connecting the dots between kind of your mission all the way down to each product team. To be truly empowered, you really have to be able to understand and be able to connect what you're doing to the ultimate mission. And so I kind of think of this as the alignment triangle for each of the empowered product teams. They have to understand, as you kind of break it down, we have a mission at the company level. We have something at Pendo called winning moves and annual initiatives. Winning moves tend to be 3 to 5 years out. These are things that will hopefully double our revenue or have multiple impacts in terms of multiples, not just incremental. And then annual initiatives, what we're focused on being great at and improving this year. And then that breaks down to product priorities, think roadmap, and then into team OKRs. In other words, I'm a empowered product team, and I understand the annual initiatives. I understand my roadmap and how they connect to that, and how ultimately they connect to the mission. So this is a good way of building trust with the team. In other words, if I'm clear about what this is all for, why this all matters, they will have a bit more sense of connectivity and trust with the bigger mission, with the company. So super important that there's this alignment. Again, not going to go too deep into strategy. We could spend the whole time on that, but want to jump into discovery, which is really this idea of developing new insights that lead to roadmap prioritization. They lead to innovation. They lead to experimentation. So discovery is, of course, super critical. Okay, so what is this? This is a picture, and I'm actually taking it with my iPhone. This is in Paris, France. I spent some time out there as we were developing. At the time, I was working for Intuit, and we were doing a lot of research in terms of how do we build QuickBooks for small businesses out in France. And so this actually turned out to be a nice picture. It's a very cozy picture. But this is us, and you can see the small business owner is the guy that's standing up there. And we're just getting to know him as a business owner, as a person. And we didn't jump right in. We're building a relationship here. And then we proceed to watch him. We asked him to not install QuickBooks until we got there. And the idea was, as a team, one person took notes, one person asked the questions, and the other just observed. Is this idea of watching and observing in the context of his space, how he used the product. And in this case, it was very insightful. Now, the point of this is not to highlight the part of discovery, of spending time with your customers, whether it's at their home or in their office, when you're more B2B focused. Again, we could spend a lot of time on that. I want to talk about one of the things that is most critical. In other words, the thing that's more important that people often skip, and it's the debrief. So I want to talk about what the debrief is. So a debrief is really important, where after you've done, whether it's the customer immersion, the customer visit, observing the customer, that same team that was there. So in the case of 3 of us, when we go back to the office, the first thing that we do is have this debrief. And we talk about whether it's going over the low fidelity prototypes that we shared, whether it's doing some empathy mapping, which if you don't know what that is, please Google it. It can really help in the debrief process. But I also like to keep it relatively simple, which is I ask 2 questions and then we start to go from there, which is, what pain did you see? And what were you surprised by? In other words, when you were visiting the customer, did you see any new pain? Did you validate pain that you already believed existed? And then in terms of surprises, what surprised you? And really taking note and circling those things, and really uh, really taking delight in the idea that you're surprised or that you see new pain, and then being able to share and debrief that with the rest of the team. What did you see? What did you see? And from there, you're able to distill very powerful insights. I think too often what happens is you go talk to a customer and you take down a bunch of notes and then you share those notes out. But what you may have seen as an issue or surprise might be different from somebody else. And so that debrief and that sharing and then talking out loud versus just sharing your notes is that process by which you're able to distill insights that again then lead to ideas or brainstorms. And this is, I think, a bit of the lost art in product management and design these days. We're skipping too many steps here, and we're not debriefing enough. We're moving too fast here, and we need to slow down and really understand what the insight, because insights are typically enduring and they typically lead to great innovation. Okay, moving right along to delivery. So the one that I want to focus here, and so you can see under delivery, we have the roadmap itself, resource allocation. So your resource allocation process and the context of delivery is very important. Here at Pendo, we write things called feature briefs or specs or opportunity briefs. There's a lot of different ways to describe these. And then of course, there's a high fidelity design handoff in contrast to discovery, where it's much lower fidelity, so that we can share with our customers and they're not afraid to give us harsh feedback. And so the one area that I want to focus here is building better roadmaps. Now you would say, Brian, roadmaps that's not the problem, that's the easy thing. I actually agree. Roadmaps are not necessarily that difficult. They're not the hardest problem to solve. But the way that we look at roadmaps is vehicles and tools to be able to communicate with multiple stakeholders, different stakeholders. And so I want to share just a couple of examples of two different ways to think about your roadmap for different types of audiences. And because I think, again, the hard part is kind of understanding the data, the context, the brainstorming, the insights, to be able to come up with the ideas, to make the trade-offs, to then get to the roadmap. The roadmap is just, okay, it's the finished deliverable, it's the finished part of that process, and now you need to communicate it. So one way, and I think about this first way, is more when I'm speaking to a prospect. And I might not use this language, but the way that I'm framing up the roadmap has to do with kind of three different kind of components. One is the idea of parity. So if there are components to our product that aren't what we call market entry requirements, meaning it's a must-have, everybody has it, check it off the box, you need to have it, that's one way. 2x is the confidence that when we show a prospect that we can win any competitive deal. And then the third is more our kind of, call it, a high innovation quotient, something that redefines the market, something that nobody else is doing and nobody has thought to do. And so we want to kind of tell the story in much more of a narrative fashion about how we're innovating, how we're matching meeting certain gaps and filling those gaps, as well as innovating and also being super competitive. So I would say the other call out here is when you're talking with prospects and even customers, to show more images, get people excited about what you're building and show the context. And then, I also have a Gantt chart. The way we do our roadmap is, things that we just finished or that we're working on now, things that are coming up for the next 3 to 6 months, and then our prioritized backlog to end with. And I do that for each kind of sections of our different product, given we're a platform with many, many tools and many products. The other way is to think about it, and this comes from shout out to Megan Quinn, who is actually on our board, great product thought leader. She shared this one with me, and we use it at our board meetings. But it's this idea of highlighting past, present, and future. The idea of past being that this is, like any person building software understands that they have technical debt, they have some quality issues, maybe performance issues that they need to address. And that's kind of, in a way to think about, it's working on the past. It's improving the thing that you have already built. Optimization could fall into this. And then there's this idea of present, which is the current, what you're building. It's kind of some of the incremental innovation. A lot of this time, this comes in the form of customer commitments or requests. It's about building and refining the product that you have today. And then, of course, future is more in line with the vision, the thing that gets you really excited about, the thing that you believe is going to really help your customers solve their pain points in a delightful way. So this is the bigger vision. And again, when I'm sharing this with, let's say, our board, there's a mix of that. Hey, we got to take care of some of this stuff. We're refactoring this part of our code. We have these customer commitments, and here's some incremental improvements that are absolutely necessary based on feedback, based on NPS. Oh, and by the way, we still haven't lost our vision. We're still excited about our vision, and we're still working aggressively towards it. So that's one way to frame it up. All right, moving on to product ops. Well, the big question will be, what on earth is product ops? And it's I would say it actually isn't, it's not something that's, I would say, novel, in that the work that these teams are doing are new. But the concept of it and having it be part of the product team and the why behind it, I think, is getting more and more clear. So let me take you through a couple of slides to kind of explain what product ops is and what it means to you and why you might want to consider it. So another shout out, our VP of product management, Jason Miller, he shared this slide with me, and I thought it really articulated well kind of the why or the pain that hopefully product ops solves. So let's go through this. I think this is kind of interesting, and I think all of us will, especially if your product manager, will relate to this. So you think about a group of, say, 8 or 9 product managers, and then you have this, again, some set of engineering, and you kind of, there's been a lot of discussion about what's the right ratio. In this example, let's say for every product manager, there's 8 engineers, which, this seems totally manageable. And then you start to think about all the different, cross-functional different departments that are frontline, or let's say marketing, all of these different teams that ultimately you're communicating with. I mean, isn't it true that you're spending a lot of time just working with support and success, the frontline sales? There's also marketing, a lot of time, a lot of effort in coordinating and talking about why we're building something, when it's coming out, how to support, how to train, and how to enable this new functionality. And then to even further exacerbate this, you think about all the customers that we have. And you think about, as one product manager, how do I cover and how do I talk to and spend time with my customers? And so this gets to be a bit unwieldy. And if you can take it one step further and you start to think about, okay, not only do I have all of my external customers, the 250 for every product manager, I also have all of my internal stakeholders. And so if you think about a company, let's say they've got 400 or 500 employees, you've got about 8 product managers, so there's a ratio of 1 to 50, let's say. And then you think about having a customer base of 2,500, so that's 1 to 250, let's say. And then you start to, again, think about, combining those and managing all those people. It really becomes unwieldy. And if I was in a big room right now speaking to a lot of product managers, there would be a lot of head nods. And so the idea is that product ops can help, as part of the system, as part of the team, help with this a bit, help with what I'm going to call out 3 different things that will really kind of create more time and space for product managers to do the things that only they can do. Now, I don't want to just say that product ops is there to serve product management. I don't think that's the way I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about it like every other ops team, whether it's rev ops, whether it's DevOps. The operations is an enabling function to make the system run smoother. And so I think about product ops, and by the way, this is evolving. This is something that I just recently tweaked based on our needs. Now, your needs could be very different. This is specific to some of our needs. So number one, just connecting the dots. We talk about being able to interact with the front line, with internal stakeholders, understanding, for example, the top accounts that are at risk highlighted by CS. I've mentioned customer commitments as sales is trying to close business. How are we all working a process to ensure the things we're committing to are strategic, they're aligned with our roadmap. And then, of course, all the feedback, all the product requests that our frontline hears. How do we enable them to be able to share that, and then to be distilled in a way that can be consumed by the product manager? The second one is a newer one and specific for us. I would imagine it could be true for others too. But when we think about, let's say, our Sev2, our Sev3 bugs that happen, of course, our production bugs, and issues. These basically, the product ops teams helps working with engineering route some of these issues to the appropriate team. So that just makes that system part of the system smooth, or operate smoothly. And again, that constant communication of what's prioritized, what we're working on, what bugs, what things do we need to fix, who's going to do them. So they help us with that. Also with related to Pendo and Pendo core product, we need to always kind of maintain a pristine product in terms of what pages and features and elements are tagged. When we think about our product tours, are they the best they could be? So this is kind of an internal use case, but we have product ops really make sure that they own making sure that our product and different tools that are part of the system are working most efficiently and effectively. And then they maintain our knowledge base, both for, again, internal stakeholders and external stakeholders like customers. And then this last one has to do with launch readiness. So the idea is, I like to simplify this as better betas. So if you think about, the day at which you launch a product, and then you kind of have a work back plan and all the criteria, all the milestones that must be true or must be hit in order to have an effective launch. There's a lot. So our process, we have a very simple gating process. You go from internal testing to a closed beta to an open beta, and then of course to GA, which is general availability. And there are certain requirements, or I think of it as a gating process as we go from kind of closed beta to open beta. In other words, what must be true in order for us to feel good and confident about moving to the next phase of beta. And so the ops team really helps us ensure that we're not cutting corners, that the criteria and the standards that engineering has defined, that design has defined, that product is defined are met at the different stages, of course, with increased fidelity as you get closer to GA. So this is something that's super important for us. Anybody that's had a poor launch understands the importance of this. They also spend a lot of time coordinating with product marketing. So there are assets, there are deliverables, there are narratives that we need to work with product marketing on to ensure that all teams, all frontline teams are both trained and enabled in order to have an effective launch. So again, a solution, not the solution, a solution to what I described earlier is that kind of one-to-many relationship that a product manager has and the challenges that come with that. This is a solution. And of course, we ask our PMs, if you had more time, like, of course, this is I hope everybody believes this, is that you would spend it more with customers. You know, as you spend more time with customers, you're going to be surprised more, you're going to see pain, and you're going to be able to get insights that empower your roadmap in a very strategic and powerful way. Okay. Last, and I'm going to touch the lightest on this part because it is a system within a system. We could have a whole, again, presentation on just design system, but from a product leader perspective, I do want to highlight its importance as part of this system. And so if you are, whether you're a startup or you're a larger company, you need to have the conversation about what is our design system in context to the maturity of our platform or our product. In our case, we're a late stage startup. We are not going to match the design system of, let's say, an Intuit, which I came from, that had a very robust design system, or a Google or a Salesforce. These have robust design systems, and so you have to kind of think about where you're at and in that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But design system, it really consists of brand, your content, design principles, components, and patterns. You know, the way I think about design system is something that describes the intent of your design. In other words, the clear sets of rules, and kind of from there, knowing what you can and cannot break. There was something I also read, and I like the definition of this, which is a design system maintains the visual and functional elements of your organization in one place. So again, as I referred to, there are some incredible design systems, from Shopify to Salesforce to Atlassian to Airbnb. All of these are fantastic. But what you want to think about is, again, based on the maturity, the need, and you can feel it as you become a big team and you're scaling. This is absolutely critical because there's a lot of efficiencies in this, as well as consistencies. And so if you think about, so I described my design system slightly different, but if you think about the design system, and shout out to Distillery Tech, I found this image and this diagram that I really liked, which is, you know, these are their aspects of a design system: the UI kit, the rules that we talked about, how things behave, the actual code. So think about it as a true, like, component, code ready asset that both designers and engineers can use. And then the brand book, which is the playbook for, again, the do's and the don'ts, the why, the thing that describes the system, the thing that helps you deliver against your brand promise. And so the way I think about this is, you know, if I'm a relatively new company or relatively small team, I at least want to think about what my UI kit and what the behavior or rules are. In other words, here are the guidelines by which we build. And then, of course, as you get more advanced, you can think about building a library. And again, these libraries can exist in tools like InVision or Figma or Sketch, where you actually do have a component library. And then you compare it with tools like Zeppelin. Again, a bunch of different tools. And then if you want to go to the complete design system, you can think about a whole site like you saw back here, where it's really your playbook that talks about the brand assets, the patterns, the libraries, the rules, in just a more comprehensive way that's both accessible to internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. And so again, my ask here is that you think about what your design system is. You know, it has been proven and shown that component libraries can save up to 50%, maybe even more in some cases, of project time for everyone on the team. And so, you know, if you don't believe this, just give it a try and just see how quickly the process. It's not just a speed on the side of the engineering; it's also speed on the side of designers, where they're not starting over every time. And again, if a designer is listening, they're like, well, of course, this is what you do. But I'm surprised to see how many people, in fact, we ourselves are still defining our design system and still need to mature it to match the level of maturity of our product. So I just encourage the conversation with your design team to understand where you're at in your design system. So again, going back to where we started, this is a team. This happens to be a part of my team. Our vision is to become a product team that is trusted so that we can be empowered. And like I said, everybody wants to be empowered. Everyone wants to believe they have all the tools and the trust required to innovate and to take risks and to build themselves without the dictation from on top. How do you create trust? Make and keep commitments. Earlier I said, think about business outcomes. In this case, think about maybe OKRs, if you subscribe to that. Again, these systems are the things by which the system is the mechanism by which you can consistently and repeatedly deliver outcomes so that you can create that trust and that brand of a high-performing team. The way you can do it through these design systems, this is our evolving point of view on our design system that works for us in our state. But remember to start with the environment. Make sure that you do in fact have psychological safety on the team, that people are willing and able to make mistakes and to correct and to learn and to be better. And with that, I would say thank you for listening. I know that was a whirlwind of content. Each one could be its own, but hopefully that was at least something that could get your team together to think about where we are at in that spectrum of feature factory and business outcomes. Empowered and trusted versus a team that is just kind of told what to do. And think about where you're at and think about what you want to be. And hopefully thinking about your system will help you in that journey. Good luck and thanks for joining.